Okay, so today we will give the first lecture for the Social Work 646 class, Module 1. As far as some of the content I give you, it's going to be rather short, so give you a little chance to breathe into the class a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about what we mean by social work in the environmental domain. There are many reasons why this is an area that needs to be examined, and I'd like to talk about a few of those right now. Our history as a profession. What most people don't realize is that social work, one of its very first sort of macro practice areas, was related to a variety of different environmental issues. As early as about 1900, social workers were community organizers, settlement house folks at that point, were actively involved in addressing some of the quality of life issues in the communities that people lived. And some of these sound very familiar today. For instance, the issue of lead, or the issues of asthma, or the issues of the quality of water that people drank, were of much concern for early social workers. It's always been recognized that the environment is important. It's just how we shape our understanding of what the environment is that might be a little bit different today. Our theories, in fact, speak very closely about this issue of the environment and issues related to it. We talk about person environment, or systems theory, or trauma theory. All of these look very closely at the relationship between a person's psychological and physical health and the social world they live in. That's one kind of environment, but also the physical world. Think, for instance, about some of the major traumas that we've experienced in society in the last couple of decades. Things like Katrina or what's going on in Houston as just overwhelming examples. Part of it is a natural disaster, if you so to speak. But first of all, there's a high likelihood that the profound effects of these natural disasters was impacted by our actions upon the environment. We'll talk more about that as the class moves on. But also, even the kinds of threats that people face down there are often closely connected to what we've done to the environment. In Houston, for instance, high levels of toxins in the waters, which will affect people's lives. In taking another example of a disaster and its relationship to the quality of life, think about what happened after 9/11 and the large number of first responders who have had serious health problems related to the environment in those communities. In the Gulf War, they talked about Gulf War syndrome, an environmental impact caused by toxins released in the air. We intervene with these people. These are our clients. And the closer we are to the client, which for many of you means in the direct service role, for others in the community role, the more we need to understand the causality of many of the problems that our clients confront. And then we have to think about our own future as a species as well. We've gone from, we'll talk about this very shortly, but a population of less than 1 billion people on this planet before 1800 to a population today of about 7.5 billion, and we're well on our way to 9 and perhaps even as high as 11 billion before everything is said and done. It's a lot of stress on the planet, a lot of stress on the systems that affect our quality of life. So, the context. The combined impact of overpopulation, global climate change, pollution, some of the other factors of such as economic inequality, religious and political antipathies are creating serious levels of risk in our society. So we're going to begin the course by examining some trends that are creating this risk and their possible impacts on the U.S. and the world. Some of these we're going to spend a lot of time with as the class moves on. Some of them we're just going to mention now. Other classes might pick up. But understand that humans do not live as Robinson Crusoes. We live in a context. So we need to understand what the impacts of that context are. And we have, again, those theories of systems or person environment that really speak to the relationship and the quality here. So it seems to me that the best way to think about this are these things that are affecting how we shape our future. And I just mentioned what those are. Population growth is one. Global climate change is another. inequality, neo-nationalism, technology, and all of these together will create how we affect how we create a sustainable planet, or in fact degenerate. Both are possible right now. Um, Neither one is certainty, but over time we have one planet, and that one planet is one that we need to care for. So let's talk about population, raw numbers. In terms of raw numbers, again, the population has changed quite dramatically over time. Before about 1800, there were less than a billion people on the planet. There are 7.5 billion people today. This estimated growth range from about 8.5 to about 12 billion by about 2100. About the time you folks are retiring, the population will hit 9 billion people. It could possibly go as high as 12 billion. Now, so what, you say? That's a lot of people. There's one thing about any species. It takes things in, it ingests, and it spews things out. It eliminates. And taking things in causes changes to the environment the species lives in, and the things that are spewed out affect the environment that people live in. This has all kinds of significant impacts upon the planet, some of which we know already, some of which we are not even able to guess. But let me give you one quick little example right now. Plastic. Plastic didn't exist at all before about 1900. Today we produce millions of tons of it per year. Many scientists suspect that in the future, if another person were to view this planet, say 1,000 years from now, they'd find something unlike it anywhere else in the historical record of the Earth. They'd find a layer of plastic around the entire planet. Our contribution to the geology of the world is the age of plastic. Think about that. Plastics have toxins. Plastics don't break down very easily. We're producing more and more and more of that all of the time. Where this population growth is changing as well. Africa, for instance, is seeing some of the greatest growth on the planet right now. From 2015 to 2050, it's forecasted to grow by 108%. Islands such as the Philippines, what they call Oceania, by about 43%. Latin America and the Caribbean by about 23%. Asia by about 19%. Europe will decrease in population. Now, most of these societies that are raising at this great rate are not what we would call first world countries. They seek to have first world qualities of life. So not only do we have the consumption of resources that we see currently by the number of people we have on this planet, but as more and more people in countries that seek that quality of life hope to achieve that level, the stress on the planet will become even that much greater. And where it happens again is different. Today, for instance, the United States is the third most populous country in the world. Nigeria will surpass us in a few years. Nigeria's quality of life will rise, undoubtedly. And as it does, the stress on the environments will increase. India will become the most populous country in the world in just a few decades. The quality of life is changing there. And again, the stress on the environment as a result. Not bad, but an observation, a reality. Conceivably, this country could change dramatically in population. From about the 300 million we're at right now to a minimum of about 320 million by 2100 to a high of about 766 million. We're not going to get there, but it's a possibility. Large numbers of people place stresses on environments, especially as they achieve the quality of life that we have in the West. Again, not a criticism, it is a reality. The U.S. population is aging. As we age, greater demands on the resources around us, less ability to work, more demands on the social systems that we have. Climate change. This to me is the one that is probably the scariest of all. By 2100, we expect a range of growth in temperatures on the Earth by about 5 degrees. Ranges from about 2 to 7. 5 is probably realistic. Temperatures will meet levels that we have not seen in all human history, which will lead to a variety of outcomes, including sea level rise, ice melt, stronger storms such as Katrina or Harvey, altered growth patterns for agriculture, increased droughts, immigration, loss of biodiversity, changes to coral reefs. The effects are variable, but they're unambiguous. They are going to happen. Sea level rise is happening. It has raised a couple of centimeters in the last few decades. It has been estimated to raise as much as about 60 centimeters in the next few decades. What that means is that flooding areas where people live, which in many cases are in coastal areas, will become flooded. As storms happen, they'll be much more dramatic. I've got some slides I'll show you later on in the class, one now and some later, that really show how this will affect where people live. For instance, look at Florida here. All these blue areas here will be underwater. And many of these changes will happen in areas that are, in fact, some of the most vulnerable already. Look at Africa. Look at what's happening will happen in India or in Oceania. Tremendous impacts upon the quality of life will result. Now, all of these things are related to larger systemic changes that will result. Some of them are happening right now. We live in a time of greater economic inequality. This is going to increase. The rich are getting richer. Wealth is getting more unequally distributed. But for our repression, the numbers show only part of the story. Look how it's rising right now. In 2012, the share of the top 10% of wealth in this country is 50.4%. This is about the greatest in history. Even before the Great Depression, it was only 49.3%. What does this mean? As the Earth changes, some people are going to be affected more because they have less ability to confront the changes that are happening. We are going back to the roaring 20s right now. This is shows you how we have really radically changed in the last few decades, putting more money in the hands of smaller numbers of families. Look at top CEO pays. This is a pretty interesting little graph here. In 1980, the average CEO of a corporation earned 42 times the average worker in that corporation. It reached as high as 525 in 2000, but even today, it's about 400 times. 400 times as much as the average worker in a company. Unprecedented in the last few decades over historical levels. And while we see this trend everywhere, it's more in the United States than in any other country around the world. 354 times is what they have the statistic here, as opposed to 28 in Poland, 58 in Norway, 67 in Japan, etc. A few other trends I want to mention right now. We're not going to spend a lot of time in them in the class, but neo-nationalism, look at Trump, look at Brexit. Changes in technology, those some are positive, some are negative. A large number of automation in business world, replacements in technology for jobs, the growth of the internet, computer security, etc. So again, to finalize this, there are dramatic changes that are taking place in all of these areas. In the next few weeks, we'll be looking at those changes and see how they affect us and what we can do about it. Be well, for we only have one planet and we create much of what happens to it. That's the end of this lecture.